welcome to another episode of Revin, the Revenue Engine. I can never get tired of that theme song. That intro music just gets you pumped up. It gets the blood pumping. It's great. Welcome to our second episode. We are your hosts. I am Justin Fordham, and alongside me is Dustin Abney. For quick intros, I know we introduced ourselves a little bit in episode one. I kind of dug into our experience, but to give a quick recap, Dustin, tell us a little bit about yourself real quick.
Yeah, so Dustin Abney, previously introduced myself as a named accounts manager at Redgate Software, but here in the new year, I'm actually transitioning out of management and stepping back into the IC world. So I am back to being a strategic enterprise seller. So my insights for this podcast will shift a little bit from a management leadership perspective and back to that of a frontline seller. So back in the trenches with the marketers. So a little bit more spicier perspective maybe that I'll bring here. So yeah, super excited to be part about this podcast. You know, eight years in a database type of technology sales, and yeah, excited to be part of this podcast and stoked to have our conversation. We got teed up for today.
Back to the IC life. I like it.
Back
you couldn't get away. You're with the grunts. I love it. That's awesome, man. And the spicy content, I'm on board for that. So we can hear from your management experience and from your IC experience. That's exciting. But yeah, it's super excited to be on here with you. Quick recap of me. I'm currently head of account-based marketing at a company called 360 Learning, corporate learning and development, the leaders in collaborative learning. And previously, I was a senior ABM manager at Redgate, working closely with Dustin as he managed both the SDR team at one point and then the named account executives soon after. And then prior to that, I have SDR leadership, SDR closing, full sales cycle account executive experience. Did about sales and sales leadership within about five or 6 years total. But joined the dark side, as like some people like to call it, became a marketer, and haven't looked back since. So, but let's jump into it. So this episode is called One Team, One Goal, and what this whole podcast is about is aligning sales and marketing within the B2B world to make sure that things are running smoothly. That revenue engine is running at full force. We put that turbo on that engine. When sales and marketing are aligned. And so the first thing, people will need to understand is that goal for each organization needs to be aligned. So you can reduce those gaps and make sure that things are more closely aligned than ever before. So that's why we call this one team, one goal, because that's it. That's the mantra for sales and marketing is we're one team. We need to come up with the goals to make sure that we're aligned on everything and all cylinders are running. So, yeah. So Dustin, tell me in your vision, what does marketing and sales alignment goals kind of mean to you? And I'll give my perspective as well.
Yeah. So I think, obviously sales goals are pretty specific, right? It's revenue.
Yeah.
We're responsible to drive revenue in the business. So the end game in terms of what we should all be striving for, right, is revenue. I mean, look at the podcast thing. We're revving the revenue engine. Like the goal has to be focused around revenue. Now, what has to be done though is like, what are the micro goals, right? What are the other gates that we should be passing through together to drive more revenue for the business? And there's a lot of different ways I think it can be broken down. But for me, I think like one of the first goals of how sales and marketing should be working together in ABM specifically, it's going to begin with like account segmentation. Like you first have to have a goal around who are we going after, right? Like sales and ABM leadership have to agree on what makes a top of account, right? Things like firmographics, technographics, intent data engagement, like what are the things we're looking at? So I think one of the first goals that we have to align on is, what is our segmentation? Like, what is our top focus?
Who the heck are we going after? Like, you can't just blindly go after people.
Exactly. You don't have alignment on that. Like, yeah, kiss revenue goodbye. You're never going to get there. So for me, like step one of aligning goals, like the little goal, like the quicker win that you can have for alignment is going to be with the segmentation, in my opinion.
Yep. I couldn't agree more. And to kind of further like dig into segmentation, Um, a lot of times, like when you hear segmentation, it could go by industry or revenue band or stuff like that. But I think there needs to be layers of what you're looking into in segmentation. And for a marketer, so many marketers are focused on the lead. Like what is a good lead, and start segmenting leads. You got to throw that vocabulary out the window. It's about accounts. Accounts buy,
Yep.
and one person does not buy. I think the statistic is 1% of leads turn into revenue. Like that, you got to focus on the account and what kind of, when we say an ideal customer profile, it needs to be focused on the account, and that's how you start to segment. Is understanding. Okay, we see that for example, the finance industry. I know at Redgate, finance was a big industry for us. Healthcare and finance. Those were our two that we started to focus on. But then we started to dig a little deeper. There's more to it than just the industry. We saw that, I'm just throwing random numbers out there. I can't remember the exact count, but the employee count was maybe 500 to 1,500 was our sweet spot. So we need to start targeting that. And then we saw that revenue band was, do they have the money to even spend? And so on and so forth. And you dig deeper and deeper and deeper, and you find that ideal customer profile. So segmentation is definitely a goal that sales and marketing has to be aligned on, because if marketers are just blindly going after leads that fit, but the accounts don't fit, then like sales is getting pissed off. Sales is like, I don't care about this lead. Like they never buy. Like nobody in this industry ever buys from us. Why would we ever go after this account? Right. So like that's where you got to be aligned on those goals.
Yeah.
What else? What would be another goal that you would want to focus on with sales and marketing?
Yeah, I think another one. So you talk about like leads, right? Like, gone are the days of lead counts and QLs,
Yep.
right? Complex sales. We have to be focused on enterprise selling, which means ABM's got to partner with us to ensure not only are we focusing on the right accounts, but like we're focusing on the right stakeholders, and we're really creating an experience that's designed specifically for them. Mm-hmm. So right, and ultimately turn them into an advocate for us within their organization, make them a champion. So I think the next thing that we need to focus on measuring is the engagement within these accounts, right? So, once you have your targeted accounts identified, then it's like the engagement. So how do we track engagement within like senior stakeholders and key decision makers that we want to, and, looking at the account, plus the people we're going after, plus campaign responses, like things like that, right? So, for me, I would say like tracking engagement within the account. So from your perspective then on that point, like how do you see ABM, tracking engagement when we think about engaging more like senior stakeholders and driving that sort of awareness within an account?
Yeah. I think there's multiple ways that you can do it. But like kind of going back to your topic of engagement, I love that because it's something that perks up the ears of both sales and marketers. But they don't talk about it. Neither of them talk about it because they look at it through two different lenses. And I think as a marketer, when we're seeing engagement, you have tools out there that can help you see like, how many accounts are you newly engaging? How many accounts have increased engagement? So those are some really helpful tools, like 6 Sense, for example. Very handy tool. We have it here at 360 Learning, have it at Redgate. That's definitely helpful. But if you don't have the tools, which is totally fine because, strategy before technology, finding ways to use your CRM as ways to create hand raisers, get those interesting moments within those senior leaders, and seeing how many of those are downloading white papers, how many of those are visiting the website. You can get that from Google Analytics. You can see the anonymous website visitors, stuff like that, and then start to kind of, follow the paper trail a little bit. But, how many people are downloading, what personas are downloading, stuff like that. And you can start to measure that in your CRM or Marketo or HubSpot, whatever you're using, and be able to start to develop an idea of like, okay, this account, we have X number of senior leaders downloading this, and we have X number of more like mid-level leaders downloading this. We need to increase our engagement now with more of the users. If you're selling a tool like at Redgate, anything that's geared towards those DBAs, we got to see how many, end users can we engage as well, so that we can get that full buying committee bought in onto this big idea of, buying our solution. So that's kind of how I view it as a marketer, is like, how are we getting people to want to learn more from us and engage with us, from different personas. And as we develop that, we now know that we're penetrating the account, from within and spreading out. And that's, that's ABM right there. That's how you should be engaging accounts, is get in there and then spread. So
yeah, absolutely. Account penetration. That's a big one.
Big time. I think some other goals that we can go through this more. We'll kind of like, generalize it a little bit more, but like goals that I think about is to be more broad, is to set expectations and standards between sales and marketing. Those are goals that you should, like, as you begin to align, as you begin to like take on this journey together, those are two big goals that you need to create for yourselves. Is like, are we setting expectations for the other party, and are we creating standards of work from both parties? Those are goals, and once you hit those and meet those every quarter, it's going to be, smooth sailing in the next year, because you're going to that's the business right there, is that you have these standards and expectations, and everybody is now working cohesively rather than siloed. And then that's, building a process right there to ensure that pipeline. That's the biggest goal, in my opinion, is how much pipeline are we creating? Because that's something that both sales and marketing can control. The revenue part, like, sales can have its influence, or sorry, marketing can have its influence and do things, but like creating that pipeline is the one thing that I know for sure that marketing and sales can have a lot of attribution on. That way, we're creating that pipeline and then moving that pipeline through the sales funnel faster. In a broad sense, those are the two bigger goals that I'm looking at: it's pipeline and how we're moving it through the funnel.
Yeah, and I would call that acquisition and acceleration.
Yep.
Right, like, what are we doing to create new ops? Right, what are we doing to get that engagement, create new ops, and then the acceleration side. Like, once it's in the funnel and we're in, proving out value and things like that, that's when sales does take on a little bit more of that load. But there's definitely a role to play, from ABM, and specifically if 100%. An op starts to stall, right? Like, stalled ops, like getting those things revived, is massive, because you got acquisition, you accelerate, then you got post win, right? The expansion, you know what I mean? And that's for a lot of times, that's when the real money is made for a company, right? It's not the initial sale, it's not the land. It's how do you take that and champion it across an organization and expand and win the bigger contracts across the enterprise. So I agree 100%, man. Acquisition, acceleration, those are two really great goals. So I guess a question I have for you, like, so a lot of times when people are like, we talk about these goals like as a high level, but ultimately we know there's an actual metric that has to be associated with this, right? In most organizations, they're going to go back in time and they're going to look at historical data and say, okay, so based off the historical data, this is how our ABM function performed over the last 2 years, 3 years. So we're going to use that data. Say a company's launching their first ABM team, and they're listening to this and they're thinking like, okay, well, I don't have historical data of how my ABM team worked before. We have like marketing, demand gen, stuff like that. So what would you recommend from a marketing perspective for a company who's making the first turn of the crank on ABM, and they're looking to try to figure out how do they set actual metric driven goals across these things?
Yeah. So been in this position twice now. And your best friend and your biggest helper is going to be sales and sales data. Like, you got to dive into the sales. And when I say sales being your best friend, is like utilizing the sales organization, from leadership to account executives to BDRs and stuff, to understand what's been working most recently and what's been working historically, and getting the more human data there of like, certain half the A's have been saying that this persona is the best one to close. The other half is saying this one. So let's take those two in account. Senior leadership's telling me these industries, this revenue band, this stuff like that. So hearing more humanized data from there, and then digging into the actual analytical data in the CRM to kind of compare notes on that, and B, to get the more I won't say accurate, but the more legitimate data there. That's the numbers that are sitting there. But I'm looking at what broadly, what industries, what employee size, like size companies are closing most recently in the past, we'll call it 6 to 12 months, and which ones have closed more and beyond that, comparing those, seeing what kind of trends I'm noticing there, digging deeper into that to now see which ones are closing faster than others, which ones are closing with higher contract value, which ones have more ARR, because I think nowadays ARR is the bigger and better number to be focusing on. So you want that repeated revenue and whatnot, and so I'd be focusing on that ARR and then dig even deeper. So it's starting out broad and then going specific to more specific to more specific to then seeing like what industries, what employee size, what revenue band, and then what inside those opportunities, who did the opportunity start with and who did it end with? So now I can start designing my sales journey a little bit more as ABM. I can now know that, okay, so this, we'll just kind of relate it back to Redgate. This senior DBA came inbound and they downloaded white paper. We got in touch with them, created a conversation. They started to become our champion. So we created this opportunity. We found a need. We know who we need to go to next. This is our champion. We started with him. So now we know, okay, to kind of start the conversation, maybe we want to go for that end user engagement. Maybe. We'll just say this is a hypothetical. And then now we know that once this opportunity is created and moves on to the next stage, we need to start engaging the manager level or director level. And now we're gearing that content, those ads, the messaging from sales, the events that we want to put on to more of that. How is this going to help you meet your numbers? How is this going to help you, finish off all these projects and meet your goals? So we're not at that business objective yet, but we're out of how is this going to benefit you as the middle line manager? How are you going to accomplish your goals and get your team moving in the right direction with our solution? And then as we see the executive buyer is the one that's the final say so, he or she needs to sign off. Now we need to start engaging them with business outcomes. How is this going to help the bottom dollar? How is this going to help move that big needle that you're looking at? How is this going to impress your C-suite level? How is this going to help you impress the board or something like that? That's kind of how I start to dig even the most granular possibles to now build that sales journey. So I understand who I need to go after, and now I understand how I need to go after them. That's kind of how I would, in the grand scheme of it all, in a perfect world, that's how I would look at it.
Yeah, absolutely. And really, like you look at that, some of those metrics, right, on historical data. I think the key thing, is that in the end, sales and marketing leadership sits down, whatever the data point is they're looking at from last year, and they just have to agree and commit to a percentage increase.
Yep.
Right. Whatever they think is reasonable at the end of the day, there still has to be that, hey, if it's, last year through these channels and this industry that we're focusing on, we generated, $5.6 million in pipeline, right? Mm-hmm. It's like, okay, then our goal is to do a 10% increase. So we should be delivering, $6.1, $5 million in pipeline in this year.
Yep. And
that's the goal that both sides are held accountable to, mm-hmm. right? And then you get into all the micro goals about how do you actually achieve that and who does what. Yep. And that's probably a bigger discussion for us to have on the backside, right? But it's like, look at the pipeline velocity, look at retention rates, like go out there, agree, tight alignment, and then go increase it, improve it, right? Enhance that buyer experience to make it happen.
I think I would also add one thing is like when you do dictate like, all right, we both agree 10% increase, it's $1.5 million in revenue or in pipeline this year. I think it's also setting percentages of who should be creating it and influencing it. And that doesn't necessarily separate you two. I think it just gives people responsibilities and holds people to accountability. So if marketing says we could help create 40% of that pipeline through marketing efforts, that now marketing, they've got to step up to the podium and be able to commit to that. And sales is going to hold them accountable. And sales will say, all right, we will take this on, the rest of the percentage on us. And now marketing's like, all right, we're going to hold you accountable to that. Accountability is very important in that, because if nobody knows exactly what they should be doing, it's kind of running like willy-nilly out there, and no one really knows exactly what they should be doing. So setting those expectations and setting those accountability measurements right there, I think that's how that alignment becomes even better, because now both parties have some stake in there, and they're like, oh shit, I've got to commit to this, and I've got to commit to this. How are we going to work together to help get both of these percentages? So I love that. That's great, man. One thing that I always look at is like the old school way of like goals for traditional like sales and marketing. Like I look at those and I'm just like, man, how lost were we back then? I mean, obviously things worked. Like we wouldn't be in the economy we have today or whatever. I mean, but like the outdated leads and MQLs and stuff like that, like I think they are important. I think MQLs are important, but that should not be the overall measurement. That is a key result to help you get to the bigger objective of pipeline and revenue. Closing deals isn't all. I know this sounds weird. To me, closing one deal with a short-term close, or like it's a 1-year deal or something like that, that's not a goal to me. Like that's just, that should be a key result to get you to something else, but you should be pushing forward to more of multi-year contracts and doing stuff like that. So those outdated, like get a sale no matter what, get you MQLs, like that, those were very outdated goals. And I think now we should, be focusing on goals of how are we increasing quarterly revenue? How are we increasing customer lifetime value? How are we reducing customer churn? And that's where you start to focus on those aligned goals there.
100%. Yeah, absolutely. And like you said, MQLs, they still have a place, right? Like, companies still rely on what I would call transactional revenue, right? Mm-hmm. The inbound driven stuff. Maybe it's more in the SMB market, right? Smaller organizations, but that's a huge piece of businesses. So yes, I am a seller saying there's still a place for all types of marketing within our organizations we sell to. That's obviously a huge chunk of revenue that drives growth in tons of organizations. But yeah, for the sake of this podcast, right, we're talking about ABM, and that's the big differentiator. The MQL stuff is not what I want to be focused on as an enterprise seller. My job is to go in there and build pipeline and build long-standing relationships with some really big accounts. And that's not done with one turn of the crank, right? And that's why it's so important when we think about that measurement he said, like, yeah, it's that targeting the right accounts. It's engaging with the right people. It's activating like the motions within that account at the right place at the right time. And it's measuring these goals that you just identified. Like that is what it's about, right? Acquisition, acceleration, expansion. Like that's, for me, like that's the three things that we have to align on. If you can do that, then you at least have the building blocks to build a successful partnership. So yeah, man, I'm all here for those three things.
And what those like that the old school traditional sales and marketing goals where they're very like marketing, this is your lane, sales this is your lane, you guys stay in it. What that does is it's more detrimental than it is successful in my opinion, because what it ends up happening is that those separate goals and like you stay in your lane, you stay in your lane, it creates a gap. It creates a big gap between sales and marketing. And I've heard of organizations, I've seen organizations where that's the real life, and like their marketers are like, I don't know who the hell is an AE over there, and the AEs are like, I don't know who the marketers like. They're the ones that make things pretty, is what some people say, and that's not how it should be, because then what ends up happening is that you start to see some things trickle down of like churning and close loss, increase of close loss, because say like marketing's goals are create SQL1s or create SQLs. All right. So that's it. That's all we have to do. It's not close deals. It's not create revenue. It's not create pipeline. It's just create the opportunity. That is your overarching goal. So now, me as a marketer, I'm like, well, I'm only going to do as much as I'm told to do. The only thing I'm being measured on is this. So I'm going to create the opportunity, and that's it. From there, I'm hands off. Sales, good luck, man. Yeah. And then sales is like, I mean, I guess, yeah, this is an okay lead. Like, all right, whatever. We'll run with it. We're also going to go find our own stuff because marketing's handing me crap over here. Like, so like that misalignment there creates that big gap, and it starts to kind of create that friction of like, well, marketing's not handing me anything. And marketing's like, well, sales isn't following up on the things that we're sending them. What the heck? And that gap just keeps increasing and increasing. And it just then becomes like an implosion.
Yeah. No, I agree. And I think the kind of where this conversation is heading is something that we probably want to dissect pretty deeper, right? I know we kind of want to have a whole nother conversation in an episode just around leads versus accounts, right?
Oh, yeah.
What really matters, what really moves the needle in enterprise sales and big spells. So I don't want to start cracking into that.
Not yet.
Too
not
much
yet.
right now. But I think that was a good little taste of what may be to come in our next episode here.
100%.
Yeah, so that was good. So yeah, man. I mean, this was a really good conversation. I think that I really enjoyed talking about this one with you. Obviously, if I were to summarize, right, kind of some of the key takeaways in terms of one team, one goal, what we're working towards as a group, we really are agreeing that it starts with segmentation. Yep. It starts with identifying where you want to go, right? Who do you want to go after? And then it starts with making sure that you have clear alignment across what metrics you're tracking, right? Whether that is senior stakeholder engagement, whether it's pipeline created, pipeline acceleration, win rates, revenue, whatever the key goals y'all decide on, you have to decide on the goals, but more importantly, you have to stick a metric to it. And you have to have both sales and marketing leadership. And then accelerate, right? Or acquire, accelerate, expand, right? That's kind of the next layer stuff, which I think we'll probably spend a lot more time on those three things in the future as well. So yeah, that was a good breakdown from you, man. Really, really good stuff on that one.
Yeah, no, this is great. And I enjoyed this conversation as well. And kind of last points on like how this can be successful is just having that constant communication between the two parties. And I don't mean a bi-weekly meeting, a monthly meeting. No, it's constant communication. If you have Slack, there needs to be a sales leadership, marketing leadership Slack channel where you guys are constantly communicating together. There needs to be a sales and marketing Slack channel, constantly communicating with each other. Goals need to be created, evaluated, approved by both parties. It's not one saying, hey, this is the goals, suck it, whatever. They need to be created together, evaluated, and approved together. And then trust. Trust is the biggest thing. Trust that both parties are doing what they're doing to achieve these goals. So I hope everybody enjoyed this conversation. I thoroughly did. I always love getting into the nitty gritty of this kind of stuff. As Dustin mentioned, I think leads versus accounts will definitely be the next topic of discussion. One that I am a big fan to debate with people on leads versus accounts, becoming from a former seller to an ABMer. But any last remarks, Dustin, before we let the people go?
No, nothing for me. It was just good chatting with you again. Looking forward to getting this the next one out and out to the public. And I'll just leave it with, again, to those listening out there and viewing, is if you have something that you'd like for us to talk about in terms of sales and marketing alignment, find us on LinkedIn, shoot us a note, ping it. We're happy to talk shop about whatever. So don't hesitate to throw some recommendations on topics you want us to discuss. But other than that, I am good to wrap this up. And there's nothing else, then yeah, thanks everyone for tuning in. Be on the lookout again for episode 3 coming shortly. Leads versus account, what matters most. So thanks everyone, and have a great evening.
Thanks everybody.